Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to 22 panels and my favorite roundtable of the year. This is our Comics for Empathy, Understanding, and Change roundtable. This year, Jim Terry was kind enough to come let us pick his brain about Come Home Indio. I have with me teachers and members of LitX, Michael Gianfrancesco from Rhode Island, Ronell Whitaker from South Chicagoland. I have librarians, Megan Smith from Suburban Chicago, and Jenn Matters returns again this year. Though last year she was an Iowa librarian, and now she's an Oregon librarian. For those of us actually keeping track, which is probably just my mother. So hi, Mom. And Jim, thank you so much for joining us. What's the cat's name? I love cats.
This is Bedidi.
Okay. So come home in adorable. Adorable. I know my cat Eddie will visit at
What's
some
going
point.
on?
Um Come Home Indio is a coming of age tale, a family story, an identity story, a story of addiction, and a story of sobriety, all rolled into one. Um, and an incredibly powerful read. So thank you for that. Do you want to talk a little bit about how it came about?
Yeah, I I had no intention of ever doing anything like this. I am a person who likes to hide behind my own work. Generally, I don't share too much about myself, and so this was not something that I set out to do. It was something that I was encouraged to do by the small independent publisher, Street Noise. Liz Francis over there was very keen on getting me to tell my story, and she approached me because I was at Standing Rock for a very small amount of time, and she wanted to know more about that and thought that I would be interested in writing about that, and I had very little interest in doing that because it was something very personal to me, and I was in no way an ambassador for what had happened there. I was not there long enough to be a documentarian, and I wasn't involved deeply enough to be. I was a passenger in that incident. I showed up and I, like I said in the book, I took from that experience. It fed me. I did not feed it in any way. It fed me entirely. And so I had no interest in, trying to represent that whole thing. But uh, it turned into, okay, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be a small part at the end of the book. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to try and show why it was important to me. And in order to create a feeling of why it would be, you really want somebody to understand why it's important. Just telling them is not the same thing as having them go on the journey with you, and then having that same sort of experience, feeling like they're having a similar experience because they're informed in ways that they wouldn't have been otherwise. And so I thought to myself, if I'm going to tell this little part of my life, I'm going to have to tell the whole enchilada. And then I just went backwards and I started from the beginning, and it just kind of took care of itself. I I did it in 6 months, and because I was working on other work, and I kept pushing it back because I didn't really want to do it, and I kept taking other jobs, and then suddenly I realized there's no way I'm going to get this done if I don't stop everything else and work on it now. And I'm really glad that I only had that amount of time because it was really just an outpouring, quick, like trusting my creative instincts, first drafts, just going straight to the finished page, and just mostly trying to be as honest as possible and as respectful as possible to as many people as I could, except for myself. and and then just trying to work through the fear of talking about those things, and trusting that I was doing the right thing by even bringing that stuff up, and I had to get to a place where I when I would when I would be talking about something particularly difficult, I'd say, "You're just doing this for the editor. You're not going to think about what anybody else is going to think. Just get it to Liz, and that's it. Don't think beyond that." And as I said, if I might not have been as honest as I was if I had any more time to polish it, and to go back and double think things and say, well, maybe I don't need it. All right, there's a more creative way to get around this. It's just right there. So it's yeah, and that's it. It was done, and she had very few edits, and I kept misspelling melancholy, which I appears to be like a keyword for me. But I kept spelling with an O, which I guess there's a definition for it. It means something entirely different. So I had to go through and do that kind of stuff, and then it was ready to go, and it was released during the pandemic to so it was a mixed blessing. It was a blessing because it was well received critically, and but it was mixed because I was unable to go anywhere and promote it, and like the one thing that kills me is it was nominated for the LA Book Prize, and whatever on that, I did not win. I didn't expect to, but how great would it have been to go there and hang out with all those incredible writers?
Yeah.
That that's like known to be like the coolest for nerds place to be, and and I was watching this stuff in my living room, and then when it was over, I just turned the TV off and I was alone, so that was the biggest bummer of it all. But aside from that, I'm just kind of stunned that people are still discovering it and that it's still got any kind of legs, and I'm really grateful to be doing stuff like this. So thank you all for being here.
One of the reasons I like to do this roundtable is because one of the things I've found with my students, one of the things I found with comics in general, is that one of the most powerful things that they do is act as a vessel for empathy and understanding. It's one thing to read a book about somebody that's different from you or has a different set of experiences, but anytime you're reading a book, you tend to be projecting yourself into the character. It's one thing to watch a movie about the same thing, but you tend to be much more outside, and I feel like comics take us inside while still making it clear that it's somebody different in a way that no other medium does. So I think it's incredibly important that there are diverse voices. There are painful and or uplifting, or hopefully both, as with yours, stories, etc. And I'm gonna toss it out to the librarians and other teachers now to really go wherever they want with this, and both ask Jim questions, and feel free to bring in your own experiences in the classroom, in the library, with whatever books, because I know at least the librarians, this was, I think, their first time reading this book. So,
and just as a general thing, comics are accessible in ways that regular print style books aren't. Literally visually so, and for neurodivergent people who need other ways to get into things, or just people who learn differently, it literally gives you access to a whole new world that you thought you couldn't have because you don't read right, quote unquote.
that's a me thing.
But how much do you read now? Look behind you.
Oh yeah, no, I've always read a ton, but I connect more with the comics.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, was it ever a question that you would tell this story in any other medium besides comics?
Not really. The entire basis of her proposal was to do a graphic novel because that's how she knew me. But I am a writer and I do enjoy writing prose. And early on, I was typewriting the Standing Rock sequence because I thought I would write it like a reporter, like just sit at a typewriter and kind of show what I saw through prose. And uh, it was so cold and inorganic that I realized it had to be, if I was going to be more prose heavy, I would have to handwrite it. And once I started handwriting it, I became less interested in how verbose it was and started paring it down. And I also knew that I needed illustrations, uh, but not cartoons, which is the big difference about that sequence. I was drawing differently and rendering differently, and I wanted it to feel entirely separate. But it was it was always going to be a graphic novel, and I really, before I started it, I reread my Will Eisner stuff and just thought, okay, this is I have to key in on the way that he made the mundane fantastic and the way that he made the mundane dramatic. Because in my opinion, like a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, it's my life, it's like my memories. So to me, they're incredibly mundane. Even the terrifying stuff is just like kicking the old rock again. It's like, okay, there's that thing. And, I had to reignite my desire to be effective about that kind of thing, and to how am I gonna talk about this stuff? And I realized very early, well, I'm a maudlin person. I'm very on the sleeve, on the face. There's no mystery involved. And I decided to try and be mysterious or smarter than I am. It was just not not the way to go. Just be straightforward and let the storytelling chops kind of lean on those and hope that I know enough about sequential storytelling at this point to get the story across.
It's like when we teach kids like how to write narratives, one of the things we lean into is to show and not tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And graphic novels, slash comics medium is great at showing instead of telling. So I think that's something that you kind of really leaned into as well in this book.
Thank you. And the beauty of graphic storytelling like this is that you can show it and then you can go deeper with what you talk about. So sometimes I would juxtapose and make it ironic, what was being talked about as opposed to the image, and just kind of have the freedom to play with the emotions and the expressions of what I'm talking about. And and sometimes it's just fun. It's funny. You're talking about something miserable, and then you could, there's there's stuff in there that I remembered, and I was laughing while I was drawing it because I was like, oh yeah, and I put it in the little word balloon, just a little something that somebody mutters, and it makes me laugh. And I don't know if anybody else will give 2 cents, but it made me laugh. And to me, that is like the beauty of being able to layer on top of those images. You can have 3 different meanings at the same time.
Jim, thank you so much for being here. And again, Tad, thanks so much for putting this whole thing together. Just a little bit about my background to kind of put things into context. I, in addition to my MLIS, have a master's in social science, and I specialized in emotions and facial expressions. And so one of the reasons I was really excited about today is to be able to add some value to if there were any certain panels that really stuck out to you that you'd want to analyze a little deeper, there's this research method called FACS, the facial action coding system, and it's used by like the FBI, CIA, NSA, and Pixar. And it's all about how
Yeah, those
the
all go together.
yes. And it's all about how the muscles in the face correspond to different emotion states. So I'm FACS certified, and I was wondering if there was a particular panel that was really interesting to you that, we could talk about.
That's a really good question. And, one of the things that I couldn't tell you one off the top of my head. But that was something that I even in the, like the weird horror stuff that I do and the freelance work that I get paid to do. I am very, very, the acting is very important to me. And that's that's just how we call, how you draw somebody's facial expression. And, I was never really into the tough guy, 5,000 lines in their angry face type of drawing. It seems like BS to me, And so I've always been more interested in the cartoonists who are able to exaggerate and to tell a facial an emotion through the exaggeration, which, like guys like Jack Davis and Eisner and Wally Wood and those guys from like the 50s through the 70s who weren't afraid to make something cartoonish. And, that way you have those kinds of expressions that are outsized, but they communicate really quickly the core of the emotion. And I don't know if there's any facial expression I could think of. There's stuff during childhood that made me smile because I was like, oh yeah, that captures that moment. Particularly, there's a sequence where my mom is telling us not to kill the spider, and she's got the spider and she's taking it outside. And I do not have a photographic memory. I have a very vague memory, and a lot of these are like piecing together and then like honing it into a page. And but the way I drew her sort of exhaustion at having to deal with 8,000 questions from these kids as she's, letting the spider outside, and she's got like a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, and she's saying, yes, yes, even scorpions are sacred. And she's just tired of answering this stuff. That is a moment that I was it made me happy when I was done with that page. And I've read it through and I was like, yeah, that's the vibe she had. And so to capture a vibe like that through a facial expression and to show, hopefully in a panel, that this is what is always happening. And she is, she is clearly exhausted by it, but she's just continuing the best as she can. And to try and convey that in a facial expression was, I think I got close there. And that's one that sticks out in my mind right now. But any other kind, I'm sorry.
23. If Megan wanted to look at it, that was page 23.
Okay. So, but any other kind of outsized reaction or anything like that, a lot of it is kind of expressing uncomfortable emotions. And so I'm not gravitating toward that in my mind right now. I'm more thinking of like a pleasant thing.
That's just a good example of like personal literacy. Like when we talk about the way that comics work, there's multiple literacies that, people have to exercise, right? It's not just the text, and it's not even just the visual, right? Like when you're drawing these facial expressions, now you are tasking the reader with having to hopefully decode what's happening on that face and then marry that with the tone of the text, what's going on at that point in the story. Like people don't give comics, I think, enough credit for the multiple different ways that people have to read it in order to glean what, whether the creator was trying to communicate from it, or if we believe in the whole, reader's theory of, lit criticism, where it's like, hey, I want to make of it. There's those so many layers that are kind of built in that are just so cool about that. It's like, yeah, I mean, you were trying to get across, like, there's this mom is exasperated, right? It's also this thing where, like, any parent is going to read that and go, yes, I know exactly what that is. And any kid who's grown up to be an adult is going to be like, yeah, I was that kid. Like, that's funny in a lot of ways. And then you have those young kids who are going to go like, yeah, why isn't she answering this question? What's that about? So it's like so many like interpersonal literacies that are built in, along with those other ways that you have to read. I think that's kind of what makes the magic of comics too.
I agree completely. And it's we were talking earlier about, comics being engines of empathy, and it's really all art. Art is the engine of empathy. It is the main communicator of togetherness that we have. I mean, all the way back to, before recorded history, we were singing songs and telling stories, and we were playing music together and drawing on the walls, and so it is really when I see comics done well, and I am engaged in a way that is entirely different from any other medium. I can watch movies passively, and I can read prose with with a certain detachment, but occasionally with all those things. I certainly read comics with detachment most of the time. When I'm reading them, I'm okay, this art is pretty, but it's not telling me a story, or this writing is not is I've seen this, and this is just a different face on the same situation. But sometimes I'll read something and and be so engaged that I forget I'm reading the comic, and I feel like I'm living in that experience. And that is that's the joy of all the arts, right? And like you said, those levels of literacy, and we all, like, there's that, is it Surratt who did the dots, the
Mhm.
do you know the story about that he used two different paintbrushes, and they're different colors, and so say he's got a red and an orange, and he puts them together, or a red and a what would make purple? Blue. And so he's got two of them, one's red, one's blue, and he puts them together, and he does all these little dots. So there's no actual purple there, but the viewer is participating and making those two colors purple. And so he's including you in the process of
Like the 3D, like the 3D art where you have to uncross your eyes to see it, to be a part of the image.
Yeah. On a more pop art level, yes. But yeah, you're actively participating, and whatever you bring to what you're reading or viewing or listening to is active participation. And I wish that more people realize that, because that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Like, you are making this unique just by listening to it.
I teach my kids that they're the final collaborator.
Yeah.
That and that's also why they can reread things, and it'll be different to them, because maybe they were hungry when they were reading one day. Maybe on another day they were on top of the world because they just got A's on all of their report cards, so they're feeling good as they're reading, and they're going to read the same thing differently. Yeah.
Every time I've seen this is weird, but every time I've seen the movie Eyes Wide Shut, I've been at a different stage in my life, and I have away from it differently about it.
I believe it.
It's like a blank palette, and he just lets you project whatever you're going through onto it. It's and that's something very strange and unique.
Well, it's kind of like the way that I use comics to teach inference to my students, because that's like the one way that they get it. We talk about like the gutters And I always use that section from Scott McCloud where he talks about how, from panel to panel, you might show a person with an axe about to swing, and then the other panel, you'll show like a pull away and like a scream. And the inference is what happens in the middle, right? And I love, what you said, Tad, about the final collaborator, because what Scott McCloud points out is like, hey, as a creator, I didn't kill that lady on the page, but you did in your brain. And like now you are an accomplice to what I had happen there. And that's like what I love pointing that out to kids, because then they're like, so the inference is like just the thing that happens in between that I have to figure out. Like, yeah. And they go, well, why didn't you just say that before? It's like, okay, thank you. Thank you. I've been wasting 20 years of my life as a teacher when I could have just been using comics and talking about like how you are essentially the person that fills in the blanks. And that's
Well,
what
yeah.
For my part, to go along with basically what's been said, just a little background on me. My master's is in literature with a focus on graphic memoir. So I did a lot of scholarship on that when I was finishing my degree. In my classroom, one of the ways I can use Jim's book as well as a number of other memoirs that I've brought to my students is in two different places. I teach seniors and I teach a graphic novel class. My seniors, one of the first things that we do is to work on their college essays, which are essentially memoirs, basically. And what I try to explain to my students is that when you think back about, and they struggle, that's the biggest challenge, is to, what do I write about? My life isn't interesting. I know everybody thinks that, Jim, you said it earlier, that it's mundane stuff, but I think people's lives are interesting to other people who are not them, which is probably why your book is so great, Jim. It's because we don't have your shared experience. We get it when we read your book, but to you, it's just like, this is stuff that happened. I have to tell a bunch of seniors who are 17 who haven't lived very long that they do have things in their past that are interesting, but how do they crystallize that? And, just got to remember that memories are not text. Most people, I can't speak for every brain, but I think most people remember things visually. You remember the images, right? If you just a bunch of words. Well,
I
I
can't
think,
make an image in my head to save my life.
yeah, but do you see pages with words on them when you're
No, I hear
remembering
them.
something that happened?
I hear them.
Okay, that's
I hear the
fair.
narration.
But I think we live in a visual society,
We do.
and I think people have flashes of images that they remember from their past. And I think one of the first things that I do is I show them excerpts from books like Jim's, where those images, those memories have become visual. And one of the early things I have them do when they've kind of started to figure out what the story they're going to tell about themselves is to do a 4-page mini comic about the moment that they are sharing. I've done it for years, and it's a really great way to get them thinking about that, what will eventually become prose text as a 650 word college essay. But as Ronell pointed out, shows doesn't tell, that uses sensory details to bring to life that memory for the person, the college, the person at the college who's reading their essay, so that they can visualize what the student is writing. So it goes from image to text. And then for those of us that conjure images in our minds, back to images when we read that text. So that's one piece of this for me. The other is in my graphic novel class, where the last thing that my students do is to do a 5 to 7 page, 30 or more panel graphic memoir, which is after all of the stuff Ronell talked about. We read Understanding Comics as well as a number of comics, and they get to choose which memoirs they read from a group of books that they can choose from, and then they have to emulate that same thing. Because I think one of the most valuable things they can come away with at the end of that course is a story about themselves that they told in that medium, that then they can take away and maybe revisit someday down the road. I think it's a cool way to tell a story, even if they're just drawing stick figures. They're still creating images from memory. So thanks, Jim, for giving me a model for my students with your book, because I have used it pretty much every year since I read it back in, I think it was 21 when I first read it. because
Yeah.
I read your book, and then a funny story, I read Jim's book, and then I was an EGL judge, Excellence in Graphic Literature, out of Denver, and his book was in the list of books that I had to read for that too. So I was like, cool, I read this one, I got a chance to read it a second time, um, for
You didn't
that
just
process.
get
So
like it's covered.
what?
Here's one I don't have to read. I can move on. I can say
No,
2 hours.
I read them all, whether I've read them or not, under this, the the requirements of being an EGL or any judge, because I've judged a couple of different graphic novel awards. Even if I've read the book, I will read it again because it's the right thing to do. And it's
I
not a
believe.
problem to
Oh,
read your book twice,
hard,
Jim.
man. I was just giving you a hard time.
It's the right thing to do, he says. Yeah, I've run into that same thing where it's like, oh, I gotta read this book again. But what happens is it kind of like, is it the same when we teach it? Or like I would assume like when like librarians will y'all do like lit circles or reading circles or book clubs, it's like there's always that new thing that comes out of a book when you read it again, right? And I've done the EGLs too. And what happens when you come across a book that you read, there is that initial like, oh, I don't have to read this. But then it's like, okay, well, let me read it with this new criteria, because the first time I read it was like for joy, right? And now it's to read it to see how does it stack up against these other books. So I'm kind of like trying to figure out, what makes this an excellent piece of art. But yeah, Michael's better than me because I think I might still skip it and just go like, I know it was great.
Shame.
Well, I mean, we're in an industry where half the voting for awards, it's impossible for everybody to read everything that's on the list. I turn in my Ringo ballot, even though there's no way that I could read everything on the Ringo list. It's like, oh, that one's really good. It got my vote.
Well, luckily for like the EGLs that both Michael and I have read for, it's more narrow than that. Like you have a category that you live in.
Is that a pop culture classroom?
It is,
Yes.
Yeah. They just announced this year's winners, I think.
Mm-hmm. It was a really good crop this year too.
So I'm gonna ask another question because as Megan was asking about faces, I immediately remembered 2 pages that turned out were even more similar than I'd remembered them being. So I both want to ask Megan about the faces and Jim about how deliberate it was to do these pages the same. Um, your first drink in the woods on the reservation, and then drinking again in college. You set up the pages nearly identically.
Yeah, that was intentional. Yeah.
I figured 71 and 104, Megan.
That was entirely intentional, and the idea being that I didn't drink. I didn't drink for many years between those 4 years. I didn't drink in college or in high school, and the fact is like the second I drank again, I picked up right where I left off, and there was no like diminishing of its magic to me. There was no, it was just like, okay, right back, here we are again. And I wanted it to be almost like an immediate recollection of the first elation that I had when I discovered it, and then to have it sort of reemerge with that same feeling. But now I'm older and things get a little darker, and so to have it, absolutely wanted that to be an intentional reminiscence and a callback.
When I look at these, what's really interesting to me is that you've got these really, really wide eyes. And it's something that you don't see in most of the panels. It's, markedly different. And when it comes to analyzing emotions, we've got like happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. And one of the emotions that's being studied now that we don't have as much information on is awe. And they're thinking that those eyes that you have right there, it does have like you can look at that and see how you might be in awe at that point of as to how you're feeling. The other thing that I see is that there's a lot of relaxation in the face. So it's not that you're happy per se in terms of like smiling and you've got these like crinkles at the edges of your eyes, like usually, the muscles that make like crow's feet. It's just relaxation. And that's a huge contrast with the beginning of the book and then in the middle where it's just a lot and when I say in the middle I mean in between pages 70 and 104 where there's a lot more tension particularly during scenes where there's any sort of violence or conflict or heartbreak. So I think the relaxation is interesting to me. What I do notice too, though, is when you look at 104, you have a little bit of these lines for those of you listening, it's hard to describe, but
Yeah.
when you like
Which is why they
if you
should go
make
buy
a
the book.
face and you right, if you find the book. If you're making a face and you pretend like you smell something really bad, those are your disgust muscles right there. That's the shape that makes. And you have those lines on 104, but you don't have them on page 71. And even though you could say, okay, well, I'm older on page 104, I'm in college. Kids get disgusted too. So those lines could have easily been there, but they're not. And that's what I find the most interesting. There's also more tension in your face, in your eyebrows going up. So like if you were to make a sad face, just on your own, if you're listening, make a really, really sad face, your eyebrows are automatically going to go up in the middle. And there's a little bit of that going up in the middle on 104, whereas there's really not as much of that tension. I see more relaxation on page 71. And I wonder if that's a reflection of like, you still have those wide eyes on 104. So you're still feeling that sense of awe, like there's this power. But at the same time, maybe there's also an understanding of what comes with it. I'm curious, what do you feel like?
Well, I mean, you hit it really close to the head. What I was going for there was, again, it's one of these things that you can write about, and you can write as I was feeling this, I was feeling that, but I really wanted to show a mixture of relief and dread at the same time, because I knew the second I drank again that it was not a good idea. But the relief I got from it was worth it to me at the time. So I'm able to identify that differently now, like many, 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 many things in this book. I can look back and say, oh, wow, okay. But I don't think I was aware of it at the moment. And so I didn't want young me to be entirely aware of it, but I wanted to show it on his face, that it was there on some primal level, was the understanding, because I never thought it was a good idea. Never in my life did I think drinking was a good thing for me to be doing. But the relief that I got from it made it worth it to me, worth the risk, worth whatever it was, and I wanted to convey that there was an awareness, but not enough to, dictate a different decision. And that the wonder was still there as well, that it was still, giving me a life before taking it away.
It definitely comes across. And I remember like seeing page 104 for the first time and thinking in my mind that you must be feeling like, oh no, here we go. Like that was exactly what I got. So that's fascinating that to know your process in creating these. I have a question. When you are drawing, are you making the face on your face that you want to convey? Are you kind of imagining, okay, this is how I felt in that moment, and then trying to draw from that?
You mean like with a mirror, like I'm looking at my own face,
Well,
or
either a mirror or even if you just like are trying to evoke an emotion like, oh geez, how can I capture this? And then you think, okay, is it like a subtle cheek thing going on? Or I mean, you because as an artist, you've got to make very hard decisions in terms of where you put your pen.
well, I have to say I didn't reference myself, I don't think, one time the entire time I was doing this. I have a mental image of myself, and it's not entirely true to what my face is. None of us really remember ourselves exactly as we are. And so I've just made myself a Jim Terry character, art wise. And that gave me the leverage to make it as cartoonish. And again, I had the freedom, to be as cartoonish as necessary when it came up. Like, when I get the phone call that the relationship is over and the face crumbles into dust, that obviously didn't happen.
What?
I have a great reconstructive surgery.
Yeah, I was about to say. I thought you had to like glue all the pieces back together.
Yeah. But those cartooning aspects, and there's a shorthand that develops when you've been doing it for a while, where you understand, okay, too many lines is too much, not enough lines. And I've studied, the masters, the people who are very, very good at acting in their comics. I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Toth, is minimalist artist. And so I realized, okay, he drew an entire expression with one line in the cheek. So those are the things that I pay attention to, and hopefully, employ while I'm working. And so it's more like what is important here. And like I said, there's a million emotions happening in this book, and hopefully I wasn't too repetitive, but it just gets to a point where you kind of know what you're doing a little bit. And it's like, okay, this is how I draw somebody happy. And hopefully, it comes off as happy and not creepy, because there's a fine line. There is a fine line. And I think one of the big things is, the eyes. The eyes are a huge communicator. And they are, as we know from the the uncanny valley. Like if you can't nail the eyes, then you have to do a lot of other stuff to make up for it. So where the eyes are looking, how big they are, if they're squinty or if they're smiley, those are all things that accentuate before anything else, because we all look at the eyes first for the most part. And that is my identifier. At least I look at somebody's eyes and see where they're looking. What are they? Kind? Are they piercing and angry? And those are the things that I personally, as like just my what's the word I'm looking for? Just like the device for living, right? Is I look at people's eyes when I meet them, and okay, this person is obviously dead inside, but or whatever it might be, and then you just go from there. And I think I do the same thing when I'm drawing a face, and I have had to redraw the faces many, many times in certain instances because it just wasn't getting the idea across, not to me. So if I redrew anything more than another, it was the faces, because those were super huge to get as close as I could to the idea.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And when I hear that, to me, it sounds like you're coming at it with almost this cognitive framework instead of trying to necessarily relive it again. And I wonder if that in some way is helpful, considering the weight of the material, uh, because, there's a kind of interesting uh, bit of research that shows that the face actually helps us experience emotion. So it's not just that we have this emotion in our brain and then it goes forward and is displayed on the face. But if you take a pencil and you bite it, it actually activates the smiling muscles in your face and it will make you feel happy. You will report feeling happier, which is, wild. But it's interesting because it sounds like that's not what's going on here. You're not trying to necessarily recapture those emotions, but tap into the skills that you've built just as an artist to, I guess, navigate those challenging moments when you're approaching a facial depiction. That's really interesting.
Well, those emotions were absolutely there. As I was going through this again, there were times where I had to put it down, and there were times where I cried while I was working on it. And absolutely, there were times where I laughed out loud over something that I remembered or, something that I was able to wedge in there that sort of encapsulated a person or something, a thing that somebody would say all the time. And I was able to fit it in a moment, and that would make me smile, but that the emotions are, like I said, that's who I am. I'm an emotional person. I wish I had a better handle on it than I do, and that's the truth. But they're there. They're absolutely there. And my job as an artist is to try and detach enough so that I can do my job. And my job is to convey the emotion, not to just have it. Right? It's there for the taking. It's already there. How do I convey it? And that is where the detachment comes, because fortunately I've been doing this long enough, and I've been working very hard at it, learning and figuring things out. And then that's where, the professional in me takes over and says, okay, time to do your job.
That leads to a question that I like to ask about artists about the acting and how they portray it in their comics in general, which is how much of it is you're very consciously thinking, I want this, so I need to do this, and how much of it is you've been doing it long enough that you have a general idea of the feeling you want, and you can just make the body language, the facial structure, and more times than not be right just as you flow.
Well, I mean, it really depends on the precision that's required, right? Because we can do broad strokes and draw, that, and or you could do this, and that, one half of your mouth is smiling and the other half isn't, and that conveys an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess being a student of that and paying attention and then applying it when you remember to. Because there's been plenty of times where I've drawn something and I'm like, that is not right. Why does that not work? And I can't figure it out. And, sometimes I have to ask somebody, what's wrong with this face? What is this face telling you? And I'm like, well, they look confused. They're not supposed to look confused. But now I know, okay, that's what I'm saying. So what generally makes somebody look confused, it's in the eyebrows usually, so then you just go back to it and work on it until it's right, which is why I was saying, that if there was anything I redrew more than others, it was facial expressions. And sometimes I get it right away, and it's like, oh, great. You read that one.
Do you have somebody that's like your first look when you're trying to figure out a page?
My first look?
Yeah, like when you look at a page and it's not Right. Do you have somebody that's the person that you take it to that knows you and or your art well enough that you want them to say, "Oh, no, that looks confused." And you can go, "No, that was supposed to be happy." I mean, or is it
When I'm
just
in the
anybody
studio,
nearby?
when I'm in the studio, I'm a member of a studio here in Chicago, and there's several other artists there. And when I'm working there, it's very easy for me to ask any of them, "What's wrong with this?" And they will take it seriously and ask me. But I'm not there very often, and I don't. And this was during the beginning of the pandemic, and I was not going there a lot anyways. So there really wasn't anybody. It was just the editor
Right.
when they saw it, and it's a tricky thing to ask somebody if they're not an artist to look at your work and tell you what is not working, because they're not used to the language of that. And say, "Oh, it looks nice," and there's nothing worse for me to hear. And then if you told me it looked awful, I would be like, "Yes, I know, I must go." But it looks nice is like, well, okay. So I just keep it to myself, and I have a fairly decent internal barometer of what's working and what's not. And if something is obviously not working, the key thing, and I tell this to people all the time who are aspiring artists, is the key thing is to fix it. Like, don't just say it's fine, because that's just mediocre. So if you know in your gut that something isn't working, fix it. It takes 10 minutes. It's either that or you just put this mediocre thing into the world forever that you could have done better. You could have fixed it. So take the 10, 15 minutes, redraw it until it's right, and then bang. And I'm not saying I do that all the time. There's certainly some stuff out there that I'm like, I get a little itchy about, but for the most part, especially with this book, it was super important for me to not put anything out there that could be misconstrued, misinterpreted, or everybody's free to interpret anything however they want, but to make what I was trying to say vague. I was trying not to do that unless it was intentionally vague. I just like
Right.
doubling back and circling around.
Yeah. One of the other themes in this book was being kind of between worlds, whether it was between native world and suburban world, or sober and not sober. And for that matter, even with the unease that you had telling any of the Standing Rock part in cartoon, because I mean, you talk about how it's not your story, and sure, the entire thing's not your story, but you were there for a week making meals, running around doing errands for people. I mean, the part that you tell me about that story, you had a story there. And it made me curious, what does it take for you to feel like you're part of something? I mean, you write about being the kind of perennial outsider loner, but you also seem to have a desire not always to be. So what makes you feel part of a community?
Are you all at all familiar with the outlaw Josie Wales? It's got its own weird history to it that I'm not even going to get into, but it's basically about a messed up guy, war veteran, who is walking around, and throughout the movie, he just wants to be left alone. He wants to get his revenge, and he accumulates a family in spite of himself, of all kinds of weirdos and ne'er-do-wells and stuff, and they build their own community. I am in no way comparing myself to Josie Wales, but that I relate to that, and that I have found that the harder I try to fit into anything, the worse it is. So I do not try anymore. I don't try to fit in with anything, and I have found that just being myself allows me to move through these things with more grace. And so I don't need to fit in. I don't need to be a part of this thing. I can be there and absorb or give or whatever it is there that I'm there for. And then, go home to my cats, and I don't have to be identified with anything. I mean, I certainly identify as Native, but even that is its own. It's got levels, It's I identify as Ho Chunk. Do I attend to every meeting? No, I do not. And I'm an urban Native, so that even makes it weirder. And I'm half. My dad's Irish, so that slices off more of the pie. So if I'm going to walk into something and say I have to be a part of this thing, then I have to abide by the rules of said thing, and they don't always apply to me. So okay, then I'm fine over here, and I will show up and I will help and I will hopefully be helpful, and you can call me and I'll be there. So the idea is that no, I'm not a loner. I absolutely need people. I joke all the time with my friends that I am a rugged loner. I have posters of Mad Max all over my apartment. That's my go-to guy. I mean, look, he's just staring off into the horizon by himself. And that is truly not me at all. I need people so badly. And I'm grateful that just being myself, I've managed to accumulate a wide variety of friend groups from all these different worlds that I am a part of. I am not I don't identify as one specific thing, but I can live in these worlds comfortably just being myself. And that is a whole premise of the book and the whole idea of the title, Come Home Indio. Where is home? It's wherever I'm at, and you're welcome to be part of my family. And so, yeah.
I like that. That's a great answer. Great answer.
It's complicated sometimes,
Oh, no. Yeah.
And I'm a person who takes things way more personally than I need to, like, oh, I wasn't invited to that, so screw that, I'm not going, but at the same time, it's like, I just need to ease up a little bit. I need to relax too. So working on that, a work in progress here.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
You do highlight something that's important about that. This past year, I've been an administrator for like 5 or 6 years, and I got a chance to teach a class again this year. I taught African American literature. The first Black person to teach it at my school, actually. And it was a really, I see some hands covering faces. And it was a really cool experience because it kind of brought me back to like what I loved about the classroom anyway, and creating those really culturally competent like environments for my kids to have discussions about a bunch of things. And the idea of appropriation came up in that class. And this idea of what is a culture vulture? Because as the end of the year was winding down, we had the whole Kendrick and Drake thing happening. Kids are kids. Kids have their own understanding of how things play out. But I think you really eloquently landed on, or at least like clarified, like how to not be a culture vulture in a way, which is really it's not so much that you are seeking to belong to every group that you are trying to be a part of. But what you don't do is take more than you give. And I think that part is the encapsulating part, right? Where it's like, you can, if you're gonna come to the party, invited or not, then you should bring a bottle of wine or something. Like, you should bring something to this party, right? Just something, whatever that is, you should be bringing something to the table and not just taking from it. And I really wish that I'd done this discussion, because there are times when it's really easy to get into debates with kids, and it's fun, right? but I wish I had that piece to kind of add into it. Like, if you are going to be a part of something, then you need to give to it. And I know early on in this discussion, you talked about how you felt like you took more from the Sandy Rock experience than you think that you brought to it, but you were still there in a capacity of, hey, how can I be useful in this environment, and how can I bring something to this table, more than just taking from it as well.
Well, thank you for that.
And then we got a book out of it, so that works.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask Jim, add?
Yeah, actually, so mental health is a cause that's close to my heart. I wrote a journal article on mental health initiatives in libraries, and it's just something that's really important to me. And I was kind of wondering, on the mental health piece of all of this, is there something that, when you look back at your childhood and your college years, um, you know, there's a lot that, maybe that a lot going on that
Go ahead.
caused a lot of pain, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, what would you say is something that you would kind of thank your younger self for? Like, I'm glad I did this, even if, there was a lot that, oh man, I shouldn't have taken that second drink in college. What's something that you're proud of your younger self for doing?
Wow, that's heavy. That's really a far out question. And it's not to say that I have not. I don't know if there's anything where I'm like, hey, man, good thing. Oh, you know what? There are things that I'm proud of my younger self for not giving up. I would say that more than anything. I have always been a voracious reader. I never was not reading. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that, there's a lot of things that I did that are not in the book that are good things, that, uh, so during the pandemic, after I was done with this book and, comics were like, oh, comics are over, we're screwed. I was like, okay, well, we're just going to have to sit here in this discomfort for a minute, and I'm going to have to find something new to do to keep myself occupied. And I rediscovered all these movies I made in college with my friends. I had a lot of friends. I was very lucky. I always have been lucky with friends. And even when I was a mess. And so we would get together, buy a case of Keystone Light, some whiskey, and make a Reservoir Dogs ripoff. That was like pretty much every movie. But we did it. And so I rediscovered these movies and started re-editing them. And I got to see not just the movies, which were hilarious and probably like nobody wants them in the world, out there who was in them. But not only that, but in between the movies, I would walk around with the camera and just photograph stuff. And I got to see all that. I got to see all of the, my friends making food, and just sitting on the porch steps. And I'm grateful to my younger self for being fascinated enough with the mundanity, just the mundane, that I, even at a young age, I was fascinated by quiet moments and things that didn't seem like they were important, but there was something deep inside of me that knew this was something I would want to remember. And so I documented those, and I was able to rediscover them and, clutch my chest a few times. And so that is absolutely something that I would thank my younger self for doing. That and staying alive somehow.
Well, I am grateful for that too. And that's an excellent answer. It's so great to hear the resilience that you have in this whole book, just something that it just comes off the page, every single page. I was thinking to myself, wow, and this guy's still here. There are so many times where, things could have taken a bad turn, and to come through on the other side of it, and then to be like secure enough to then put that on the page for the world. Like, just thank you for that, because I know that this is helping people that need it. And it was really, really something to read. So I appreciate that so much.
Thank you for that. And, I have to give credit where it's due. I am a member of a fantastic sober community here in Chicago, and people who are very supportive of each other. And I have had to tell my story many times. I've had to explain why I'm here, what happened, and what it's like now. And in doing that, it really helped me to put it together in a way that wasn't just like a giant foggy vapor of a mess. And so retelling with the purpose of trying to be helpful throughout my sobriety, was hugely instrumental in giving me the courage to put some of that stuff on the page. Because if I didn't feel comfortable talking about my lowest moments with people who needed it, then I would never be able to do it in a book form like this. Because let's face it, and I've said this before, like, why would you write a book about yourself unless you're like trying to be helpful or you're an egomaniac, right? Those are the two things, to me at least. It's like, okay, well, hopefully this will be helpful. Somebody can learn from this experience, or like, look at how great I am. And I as much as I would love to be the second version, I'm I'm a work in progress.
I think we all are. I think we all
Yeah.
are.
I think I'm pretty great.
I think you are too. Ronell, I think you are too.
Michael, Jen, any last questions or comments for Jim?
No, just I'm glad to have met you after I read your book. I met you, I think it was in C2E2 a few years ago, and
Me too. It was this
and-
last year, wasn't it?
well, yeah, but I met you prior,
Oh yeah.
and then really grateful that you were able to join us on a panel about memoir comics this past spring at C2E2. So look forward to whatever it is you're producing next.
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, I was about to say, we got Deathstalker going right now. Leans into all of the weird versions.
I will tell you this. I did get done with Deathstalker. That's done. And that's
Okay.
like our fantasy from, like a VHS dream come. And it is vulgar in all the ways that I love. But I jumped right from that into this project that I'm working on with the Newberry Library. So
very
it is,
nice.
if I can explain it very briefly,
Please.
they're having a show in September, and they're reaching out to the Native community. And it is a huge outreach program that they've engaged in. And as far as I could see, it is entirely sincere. And I was impressed. And so they brought in me and myself and two other Native artists, one Potawatomi guy and a young Oneida woman. And they said, here is this collection of all of this stuff pertaining to natives, whether it was written by a native, written about a native, or if a native was tangentially mentioned in the book, this person bought it. And so they said, here's this massive collection, read what you will and create something. and then we'll show it in September. And so the Potawatomi guy, he is very talented and he is a fine artist and he did a painting, and the young lady is incredibly skilled textiles person, and she is making a dress. And I am dumb, so I said I will do a comic, a 24-page comic about this experience, and it is it's different. It's very different, and it will be available at that show. I don't know if it's something meant for the general public or if it will be, it's acidic. I did not love this process. It was difficult. And I'm very free about expressing that in the comics. So, like I said, be careful what you ask for. But if you're interested, I will be sharing about that, more information on that as it gets closer to.
Is this Indigenous Chicago?
Yeah.
September 12th through January 4th.
Yeah. So the comic will be available and original art will be displayed, and yeah, I'm just finishing that up now, and it has been an ordeal. Yeah. So if you can, check it out.
We'll have to check that out. Now my final question for everybody, just because I like to elevate the medium of comics, can we get a recommendation from everybody? Any book whatsoever. It can be on topic, off topic. Jim, you can give me your favorite horror book, whatever. I'll start with Jim. Give the listeners a comic they should read.
Well, my go-to is Will Eisner's New York, Life in the Big City. That was a life changer for me. I mean, literally, my life changed when I read that book. But if you're just interested in storytelling and a cool, incredible, long unfolding tale with a lot of that excellent acting that we were talking about, I always recommend Stray Bullets by David Lapham. It's really unlike anything else, and there's no superheroes. It's just gut-wrenching drama. There's your original.
The only original page of art I have is a page from Stray Bullets.
Yeah. It really knocked my socks off when I read it.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else want to jump in, or do I have to call names?
If we're doing go-tos, which is way easier for me to do than come up with lately, either Lumberjanes or Saga. I love Lumberjanes for all of the different ways it presents the female, and it does it with humor, and that's important to me. And then Saga is a beautiful giant saga of a story that I've had to fight to keep in libraries because it's definitely part of graphic novel. But it's a beautifully drawn, beautifully told story.
I remember I think it was the 6th story arc, or no, 9th story arc, where literally every first splash page was completely X-rated. You couldn't open it in the comic shop.
The very first page
of the floppy issues
of the first book, Tad, is her giving birth.
Yeah. But like issues.
Calm down.
Like 49 through 53. They laughed about how novel. They just kept.
It's a graphic novel.
It's so good though.
It is.
I want to get a shout out to two things. One, Lawrence Lindell's Blackwood I just read recently. I'm a fan of the work that he does with Linnea House anyway, or they do with Linnea House anyway. But Lawrence Lindell is just a dope creator, and this book is all about kind of what Jen was talking about like what does it mean to find a space where you can belong when you feel like you don't fit into certain paradigms. And it's a really, really cool, fun book, simple, cartoony kind of style. I'm going to be throwing this book at kids in the hallway, just like violently, like, read this book. So Blackwood I really love. And I'm going to steal this, and just in case Michael's going to say it to make it harder for him. But we're in this group called Finer Things Club. We read books all the time, and watch a movie and listen to music. And one of the books that I've been wanting to read forever, he picked. I think, did you pick it or did Adam? Adam picked it. Our friend Adam picked it. And it's called Punk Rock Karaoke by another Chicago creator, Bianca. I never know how to say their name, Eunice or Shunice. I'm suck at that last name part. But been a fan of theirs for a long time too. And this book is kind of a culmination of that same kind of, finding yourself in a scene that maybe isn't always as welcoming to Black and queer and other types of identities, but again, just showing it like, hey, we exist in all the different places too. And I love them as a storyteller, so this book was right up my alley as well. So those are two I would go to. And then my final one is a book that gets stolen from me every single year is Blankets by Craig Thompson. I mean, that's another kind of graphic novel. And I'm sorry, I have one more. I'm sorry, one last one.
Whoa, he is cheating.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss out
landed
really
on me
quick
so
though
hard.
that if you haven't read it, you need to read Ginseng Roots. Craig Thompson
Oh, yeah.
just did a follow-up to Blankets. This is also fantastic.
It is on my list, absolutely. And then I want to shoot back Lubeck really fast. It is a story, and I never remember the creator's name, but it's a book about if genies were real, but they are a
Dina Muhammad.
yes, thank you. It's they are a resource that is basically being stolen from the Middle East and packaged and commercialized, and it's a very good book. So definitely check that one out as well. And I'm done with my 4 books that people should read.
I love that you're enthusiastic about it.
Yeah.
What about you, Michael?
Well, I can't let Ronell say 4 and not say more than one. One of the books I've been shopping around this year at the cons, it's right behind me. 8 Billion Genies.
Oh yeah.
Charles Soule's book.
And Brian Brown.
Yeah, it is unbelievably. It's on our summer reading list, and I actually put it on my AP list for summer reading this year for my AP Lit kids. Every person on Earth, when the population reaches 8 billion, gets one wish. Everybody, just one, and the world immediately goes to hell instantaneously because people start wishing for crazy stuff, and it's just if the last page doesn't make you cry, you have no heart. The other I wanted to mention was one that I think needs way more attention from a friend of mine, Joel Christian Gill, Fights. If we're talking memoirs, this
great
is
one.
That's also Street Noise, I believe, right?
yeah.
Is it?
No, it's
Or
an
no?
Oni book. It's Oni, but
They did a book with Street Noise
yeah,
later.
I believe so. Joel's a professor in Boston. I've worked with several times regionally at cons. Fantastic book. It's kind of like a little harsher version of New Kid, kind of is how I describe it,
Yeah.
Which is really worth your time. And the last one I would recommend, just back here somewhere, is George Takei's book, They Call This Enemy, which is really great stuff to show kids what happened with Japanese internment camps from the point of view of somebody who was there and has it shifts in time a lot in terms of like his reflection both as a child, because he was 5 years old when he was originally went to the camps, and then as a teenager fighting with his parents over what he sees as their inaction, and then as an adult, and even a person who's much older looking back at how his history was impacted, his personal history was impacted by all that. So those are 3 books.
Michael, let me add an anecdote to yours real quick, and I'll make it quick. I have done book clubs as a librarian and then as a teacher for almost 20 years now. And that is the only title that has ever made adults cry at a book club before, would be Takei's title. So
yeah, it's cool. I got a chance to meet him because I work at Rhode Island Comic Con, and he signed my copy for me backstage at his panel, and we talked about the book. And he's an activist these days and very focused on getting information to people, and all the things he had to say about this book just made me love it even more. So definitely check it out.
I will also say that book is one of the reasons this particular roundtable exists. I had a student who overall isn't particularly visual, but he liked to have really heavy discussions as part of his speech therapy. So I would have to give the speech therapist reading materials so she could be up to speed for their conversation practice. And he wanted to talk about Japanese internment. So I put together a selection from that and gave it to her, but I also showed it to him so he'd know what she'd seen. And this non-particularly visual kid cued in on the page where they're getting to the racetrack. And the fact that the kids are, we're going to get to sleep where the horses sleep. And the parents are, we have to sleep where the horses sleep. All on the same page, and how that was something that he just could not imagine any medium conveying in that way. And it got me really thinking about all of this with comics. So, Megan.
I have one book. It is Muhammad Najem, War Reporter, How One Boy Put the Spotlight on Syria. You want to talk about empathy and understanding, and also another story of resilience. This is a graphic memoir, and Muhammad was 8 years old when the war in Syria broke out. He goes through loss after loss after loss. And when he's 13, he decides he's just absolutely done with not doing anything. Or I think maybe was it 15? Anyway, he was a young teenager and he decided to use his phone and interview people all around his community. And when he would upload those videos to social media, it got the word out about the real effects of the war, and it ended up getting picked up by CNN. So it had a huge impact. And, for any fans of history, and if this is a really great one, and if, you're trying to look for something for kids, this, I would say you could have a fifth grader read. That'd be probably, if there's, you always know your kid best. If your kid's like really, really interested in that and can handle stuff like that at a younger age, but you could definitely easily give this to a middle grader, and they'd find something to relate to in that work. So.
Thank you for a fantastic set of recommendations. Thank you for a fantastic panel. Jim Terry, thank you for a fantastic book and for sharing your time with us. For Jim Terry, Megan Smith, Jenn Matters, Ronell, Whitaker, Michael Gianfrancesco, this has been 22 Panels, and we will see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22 Panels Podcast.